Good day. This is Richard Wexler with Caring in America, the podcast for caregivers and care recipients. Folks, most of you know my story. 20 years ago, minding my own business in the software industry, married later, 2 small children. And between my wife and myself, we had all 4 parents. We thought they were doing great. In the summer of 2005, the phone starts ringing and we find out they're not. So we wind up taking care of them for the next 14 years. Pretty hard to imagine. And go back to 2005, I realized I could barely spell the word care, really started educating myself as to what that was about. Eventually began educating people locally and across the country about this thing called aging and this thing called care. Started this podcast about 2.5 years ago. And then earlier this year became the CEO of A Plan to Age. We have a special guest with us this morning, Linda MacDougall. I'm going to introduce Linda in a second. She is a holistic health practitioner, author, and speaker who specializes in the unique and complex needs of seniors and the disabled. She's worked her way up from direct care to running 2 group homes for United Cerebral Palsy clients, and later serving as a federal advocate for Hawaii's developmentally disabled. Are you there, Linda?
Yes, I am.
How are you this morning?
I'm great.
Where are you physically sitting, ma'am?
In a chair.
No, but thank you. You win.
Ventura, California, basically. Ventura County, California.
How's your weather today?
Actually, we've got sunshine today.
Very good. Very good. A little colder here outside of Boise. It was probably about 25 early this morning when I got up. So I have a few questions for you. First of all, your career spans working with the developmentally disabled and the mentally ill. And you're also now serving the aging population. What are the key shared challenges you've observed between these 2 different groups?
Well, you've got the devices for the developmentally disabled and the seniors. You've also got, with the mentally ill and even with the developmentally disabled, you've got some challenges with mental abilities. So it all melds with seniors in one way or another.
Quite interesting. I mean, tell our audience, how long have you been doing this?
Well, working with the developmentally disabled, my mother started me off when I was in high school. So it's been a while.
And that was last year. I know that.
Oh, yeah, last year.
So did you take to this right away? You say your mother started you off. Is this something that you had a passion for?
No, she wanted me out of the house. So she pinned a
Interesting.
job note to my pillow.
Where did you grow up?
Well, it was in Ventura County still, but it was in Ojai, I'm in Port Hueneme right now, but I grew up in Ojai in the same county.
So tell the audience more about your background, from an educational background, and kind of how this whole career started.
Well, it started because of my mother, but I always felt like an underdog. So it was a natural fit for me, actually, in many ways, because they are underdogs.
Interesting.
So I eventually became an advocate for the underdogs.
And explain that a little bit more to our audience. Who are you referring to as an underdog, and why do you see it that way?
I see all of the three that you mentioned, the developmentally disabled, the mentally ill, and the seniors, all as kind of underdogs unless they speak up, because they're either in homes or being taken care of. They don't have the agency that we have in many cases.
And I can somewhat see it for the mentally ill and the developmentally disabled. Maybe help our audience also see it for aging and seniors. A lot of seniors are on the younger end. They're still very active. They're still very cognitively with us. A lot of people and you know this better than I. Sometimes things change for a younger group as well. But as we age, a lot of things do start to change. Can you talk a little bit more about why you see aging and seniors as underdogs?
They're under the auspices of other people as they age, and other people begin making decisions for them, I mean, we're aging, so therefore we are not as capable in some ways, and we start deteriorating to a point where at some point somebody has to take over for us often.
As you know, and we've talked previously, when we started a plan to age, the whole idea was exactly what it says. What's been frustrating for me and disappointing is that most people, when I say most, I use a pretty conservative number, like 95% of us, don't really understand what aging means as we start to change. We're aging. That's great. We're doing things a little bit differently. Hopefully, we're wiser. We've had experience through 60 or 70 or 80 plus years. But I think the thing that most of us, and maybe I'll get your comment about this, the things that most of us don't think about, what happens when something happens? And needing that care. And you just mentioned maybe someone else needing to look after someone. Can you talk about that a little bit as well?
Well, we often have somebody that has to come in and either help us financially because we're no longer able to do that, or come in and do housework or construction work or whatever we need for our home if we're still in our home.
Right.
There's just things that you cannot do well anymore. Like, I don't work on cleaning my bathtub anymore because that's a little difficult to do unless I'm in the bathtub. Then I can do it.
Uh, no, just bending down and doing that as we age. I mean, your 40-year-old, maybe your 45-year-old, your 35-year-old doesn't think about this, but hopefully at some point they'll be there. They'll be 70, 75, 80 plus. And yeah, it gets a little more difficult just to do things that we always felt were normal, whatever quote unquote normal is, that are more challenging now. Let me go back to your education a little bit. I believe you have an MA in counseling psychology. How do you integrate the emotional and psychological aspects with the physical health challenges of, we'll call them maturing adults?
Well, one of the things I also am is a senior massage therapist. And we're taught as therapists, as massage therapists, to keep people quiet on the table so they can relax. Well, I don't do that with seniors because they often don't have the ability to express themselves, especially if they're going through grief or family problems or health problems. So I let them talk. If they want to talk while they're on my table, that's fine. Because they get that out. If they don't have people talking to them a lot about them.
No, that's really interesting. I was talking to someone yesterday and I brought up the subject matter, and I've talked about this before, and it may sound a little nuts, but what I'm at 72, what I'm trying to do is keep this thing moving. And I do a lot of driving in the car, going to appointments, and a lot of the time I'm in the car by myself. And what I've found, and it seems to work for me, I'm not saying it's going to work for everybody, I talk to myself.
Yep.
And when I talk to myself, I actually want to answer myself. So I may be talking about what I'm going to do when I get to that appointment, or what I'm going to do when I leave that appointment, or my next appointment, or what I have to do when I get back to the office, and then actually respond and answer myself. And again, maybe I'm nuts, maybe I'm crazy, but trying to keep, putting oil in this thing out there and keep this thing moving, because I'm hoping I have 20 years left on this planet and can be pretty cognitive during those 20 years. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I do that not when I'm driving particularly, but when I'm walking the dogs.
Okay.
And I find myself that I'm talking out loud enough that I need to shut up again.
Interesting.
But yeah, I do that because I'm a natural introvert to begin with. And so I don't go out and talk to a whole bunch of people. I do have friends here and I do talk to people, but it isn't every day. There's nobody here. So I talk to the dogs all the time.
Eric, so you don't find me completely crazy that
No,
I'm having these conversations, and part of it is intentional, trying to keep whatever is up top still moving.
mine isn't necessarily intentional in that way. It's just that I have nobody to bounce ideas off of but the dogs. So that's who I use.
Sure. No, and I think that's great. And folks, I always tell people, please share these episodes and share what Linda and I are talking about. And if talking to your dogs, if talking to your bathtub, if talking in your car, if talking to your clients, obviously, is something you enjoy and you think will be helpful as you age, I think that's great. You highlight the widespread misuse of mobility devices like canes, walkers. Can you detail some of the problems? I know, tens of thousands of people fall. Are there common mistakes in selecting or using different devices?
Well, it starts well beyond that. It starts with the insurance companies owning the doctors not taking the time to then see somebody who needs a walker, cane, wheelchair, whatever, and referring them to an OT or PT for a proper assessment and sizing and training on whatever device they get.
Sure.
And so when they don't have that, they pick something out of the drugstore, out of, I've heard one person say he got his cane from the thrift store. So they get them from wherever. And then they don't know about the height this should be. They don't know about anything. They just said, I need a cane.
Well, that's interesting. And maybe it's something I haven't thought about as well. I'm fortunate where I don't need a device, but thinking about that and making sure it is the right device, it fits you properly. All of a sudden, you're now walking with a walker or walking with a cane, hopefully not in a wheelchair, maybe some point in a wheelchair. But again, as you said, working with your doctor, working with the appropriate professional to make sure that I don't anymore, but I used to snow ski forever. And when we snow skied, the skis you got, the poles you got, they were basically fitted to your size and ability. So I guess talking out loud, when you need a device to help you move around, they should be fitted properly as well. Your thoughts?
Of course, they should be fitted. I can't tell you how many people I've readjusted canes for, or I've told lots of people this little that one, the wheelchair there with the low back. A lot of people need a full back because they need postural supports. They need seat belts. And if you go into any home almost across the country, you're going to see that they've taken the seat belts away.
Wow, interesting. And again, and I believe me, I know things get expensive, especially as we age. DME equipment, durable medical equipment, and hopefully Medicare will pay for these things that you need. But as I can see someone doing, like you said, going to a thrift store, maybe finding a used walker, maybe finding a cane, buying a cane at a local drugstore. And I had an accident years ago and used a cane for a very short period of time. And I came to realize even the suction cup on the bottom of a cane, there are many different types. And your balance, I know there's types that have multiple grips, there's types that have one grip. And thinking about that even a little bit more, I can imagine how those would affect your balance based on what you're using. Thoughts on that?
Well, of course. And you need, especially with those four-pronged canes, you need to understand how to use them. They aren't the same as a cane with just one tip. And there's multiple kinds of canes. So you need to make sure it's proper for you and what
Right.
you need.
That's really interesting. We talked about that you ran two group homes for the United Cerebral Palsy. What's the most important lesson you learned from supporting both the clients and also the care workers?
Well, I would tell my care workers when they got out of line. I had one who was in a I'm not going to talk to you phase with one of the clients one time because she was mad at him. And I said, you can't do that. You're an adult, you know,
Well,
we act like it because these guys are paying your salary.
interesting.
And so, I mean, she was a great person when she was good, but when she decided to be 2 years old, along with the client who was also an adult, it's very interesting. I loved my clients and my staff. I even entered one year. They didn't get a Christmas party at the main office, which is where the Christmas parties were always held. And so I saw a contest to write why your company deserved this Christmas party. Well, I won it for my
Wow.
staff. So, and I also looked into homes for battered women and things like that, so that because we had, when you have staff that are less educated and stuff like that, which a lot of caregivers can be, don't have to be, but often are, they're coming from abusive homes quite often. So that's something else you have to look out for. So I tried to do that. With the clients, that was rather trippy. I learned a few things from them. One, they could be as old as you are, and if they get to talk for the first time through a machine, they learn real fast how to lie.
Wow. Interesting.
They
Wow.
they've never had a voice.
Right.
And once they get it, they realize the weight of that.
Wow.
Use it. I fired a guy once because one of my 40-year-olds had gotten a device and he was saying he had been abused.
Wow. Interesting. So as we get close to wrapping up, a couple more questions. When you're looking at the environment where a client lives, let's say they're still at home, what are you looking at and what are you assessing in that home for a client?
Well, there's obvious things like rugs. And if they're not glued down, but they have those sticky things that will keep them down. That's an obvious thing. But one of the things I have found is furniture mismatches. I have found little tiny women in really big recliners. So their feet were that far off the ground.
Wow.
In this particular case, she had been given, I got to know her because she called me about a muscle relaxant. And she wanted to know if I knew anything about it. I said, I don't. That's a new one. I will tell you about it in a minute. And when I went over there to tell her, that's when I saw what she was sitting in and went, oh my goodness, no wonder she fell.
Sure.
You know, so there's that. I had somebody with a pedestal bed that was equally as small as that lady
Oh,
get on the bed really well and could have injured herself quite severely had she.
yeah.
Yes. So there's
People,
furniture issues.
people probably just don't think about some of these things and maybe had a pedestal bed since they were quite a bit younger that was easy to get in and out of. And now, as they age, it probably isn't the appropriate bed to use anymore. Pretty interesting. Last question for you. You, like I, were baby boomers. What have you used from your own life and your own experience when you're speaking to people, when you're working with people? What are you taking from your own journey?
Oh, a lot of things. I have worked on this body for a long time. I have flat feet. I see, I'd say at least 90% of seniors that I see with flat feet, also wearing very flat shoes.
Interesting. Yeah.
And that will throw your whole body off and you will be miserable as you age. If you have flat feet, the entire center of your body is being pulled down. If you have
Yeah.
high arches, it's just the opposite, the contraction going up. So, and that's one thing you feel with your fingers when you're a massage therapist too, is that kind of thing.
Interesting. So again, just I do this in my work, and it sounds like you do this in your work as we continue to age, a good thing. We're taking the lessons that in your case, started with your mom and have progressed from there and obviously apply them. A lot of what I'm doing with a plan to age is the experience I came through with my wife, our two small kids, not having planned before these four parents got ill. And yeah, 14 years is a long time. And I tell people most of you aren't going to wind up caring for all four. It's not going to last 14 years. A lot of you will care for one, and it could last a good period of time. And I try to tell people it'll never be easy, but having a plan, talking about it, thinking about it, getting ahead of it, compared to waiting for that phone call or that text will make it a lot easier. I want to thank you, Linda. I want to thank you for joining us today. As we get ready to wrap up, folks, as I always say, first of all, again, share this episode. And as I always say, until we talk again, have yourself an awesome day.